It seems like a lot of people in the film community right now hate MaXXXine, which if you're out of the loop is the third film in the X trilogy from Ty West, even though you don't need to see Pearl to understand what's going on in this new one. But when X came out in 2022, I really liked it a lot. It was still in that time where we were really in need for some great movies since Hollywood was still recovering from the pandemic, and it just scratched the itch of a great theater experience for me. I'm an absolute sucker for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre setting and time period, which is one of the reasons Resident Evil 7 is one of my personal favorite horror games. So when you have that setting, throw in some crazy ass old people, and have some of the most fun horror moments of the past 10 years, you've got a fan in me, and it's still my personal favorite of the trilogy. I liked Pearl when it came out later that year, and although I didn't like it as much as X, it is definitely one that has stuck with me the more time has gone on. And the way Ty West was able to imitate the old school Technicolor and peaked audio mixing on top of the Mia Goth crazy performance, it's hard to not like that movie. And now we have MaXXXine, which apparently isn't the finale to the series, I guess, and takes place 6 years after the events of X, as MaXXXine tries to make the transition from adult movie star to just regular movie star, while also trying to survive the murders of the real-life Night Stalker who was terrorizing LA. And if you're going on film Twitter right now, it seems like a majority of people really hate this movie for some reason, and I'm a little baffled why, because right off the bat, I agree, this is the weakest of the entire trilogy without question, for reasons that I'll hop into in a second. And if you were somebody that didn't really like X or Pearl, then yeah, I don't think you'd like this one either. But for so many of these people to call this one of the worst of the year is making me feel like I'm insane, because sure, it doesn't have as many iconic scenes as the first two movies, nor is it nearly as fun as the first two movies, but you're telling me this is only one peg up from Madam Web? Get the fuck out of here. I'll be getting into spoilers because I like talking about every aspect of the movie on this channel, so if you like that, be sure to subscribe and stick around. But if you still have to see MaXXXine and don't want to know anything about the ending or the kills, be sure to subscribe and then just come back later, because my biggest problem with the movie is also probably the biggest spoiler of the movie. So before we touch on that, let's talk about what I liked most about MaXXXine. For one, I think Ty West is proving himself to be a master of horror period pieces, because in every single film in this trilogy, you can feel the place he is trying to bring you back to. And even though Pearl was shot on modern cameras, they did such an excellent job of imitating that style, and they did the same thing in X. And damn it, they do the same thing here. The way he is able to sum up so many things going on in 80s Hollywood within a quick 90-second montage, or a tracking shot that breezes past 3 or 4 different stores, is all intelligent, well thought out world building. And sure, maybe it's not as detailed as something like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but it's still enough to feel like we are actually in a B movie from the 80s. And even though there are surprisingly not a ton of kills in this movie, some of them are pretty satisfying. Like the entire alleyway scene with Buster Keaton, I wanted way more of that kind of stuff, because I felt like X was giving me satisfying deaths and laughs non-stop. And since this happened so early on in the movie, I figured we were going to get a lot more of this kind of gore, but I felt like it kind of peaked in that specific scene. Mia Goth is solid here, and allegedly maybe she was a little too solid here, but I do feel like this was the weakest of her 3 performances in this series. And that's probably because she doesn't have an iconic moment like the Pearl scream or the double performance of X. And in this one, she's kind of just there and things are happening around her. I honestly liked a few of the side performances a lot more. Like Kevin Bacon was absolutely awesome in his sleazy private investigator role, and he kind of just stole every moment from Mia Goth anytime he showed up on screen. Giancarlo Esposito doesn't have a lot of screen time, but he gets to kind of play a more goofy version of his stereotypical character, and there wasn't a single dull scene that he was involved in. I also really liked Elizabeth Debicki's performance as the director, and it just confirms even more that she is one of the more underrated actors we have working right now. And on top of all this, I felt like this was the coolest love letter to horror movies out of the entire trilogy. These movies have always had a reputation for being not real cinema and shitty, and honestly, the 80s slasher genre has never been one of my personal favorites, but they are such an important chapter in the history of Hollywood and should be studied when it comes to the legacy of fan bases. And the line comparing the amount of horror movie fanatics compared to Terms of Endearment fans over 40 years later really stood out to me, even though Terms of Endearment is still clearly a great movie. But now let's get into my negatives, and before I get into my biggest problem with MaXXXine, let's fire off some quick nitpicks that I have. For starters, I really hate quick flashbacks that remind the audience of something that was said 10 minutes earlier in a movie, and maybe this choice was intentionally made to imitate some other 80s horror movies, but like I've said multiple times about WandaVision on this channel, just because you imitate something goofy from the good old days, that doesn't automatically make your imitation good. Also, this entire plot feels a lot more all over the place compared to the first two films, and maybe that's because Ty and Mia saw the success of those first two and said, all right, let's pump this shit out right now. Because the fact that we got an entire trilogy in 2.5 years is pretty fucking impressive, but I feel like if this was to come out a year from now and things in the story were fleshed out and organized a bit better, this entire thing could have been everybody's favorite of the trilogy, because everybody has complained about the third act of this movie, and some people say it comes out of nowhere, which I actually don't agree with at all. In fact, I think the twist might be the most obvious in the history of movies, because ever since watching X, it was clear MaXXXine's father was going to be incorporated in some sort of way. So instead of just filling the audience in on that from the get-go, they decided to make it this big reveal that he was behind the plot the whole time, and they make it more obvious by opening the movie on MaXXXine as a kid again, just to remind you that she has the creepy father. So by the time it's revealed in the movie, I didn't hear a single gasp in my movie theater. Nobody was shocked at this reveal at all. I think if they just ditched the entire Night Stalker idea and just went all in on the studio system and religious fanatic storylines, this movie just would have been way better. But instead, we get this half-assed 4-minute shootout towards the end of the movie that feels so boring compared to everything else that was built up to this moment. And again, the whole thing just feels like a horror wannabe version of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood without any of the excitement that Leo and Brad brought to that finale. And don't get me wrong, I had a fun time at the theater. It's a fun, enjoyable movie that you could go with your friends, your girlfriend, maybe not your mom, but if your mom's into horror movies, maybe she could go too. But the more I think about the movie and the more I write about the movie, the less I end up liking it. I still don't think it's one of the worst of the year by any means. It's not even close in my opinion. And if you like the first two movies, I still think you should go to the theater and give this one a chance, because chances are you will probably enjoy it. I honestly can't see anybody enjoying this one more than X or Pearl though, but trust me when I say this, I have seen way worse third installments in terms of trilogies in my lifetime. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you as always. This is all of my social media right here, but I'm the most active on Letterboxd for obvious reasons. It's the only one that matters. But if you want to do something that matters, be sure to hit the like button, because that helps me get paid a little bit for making these videos. And if you really like the video and you want to see more from me, be sure to subscribe, because we're doing a ton of movie related content on here, trying to get more consistent, been more consistent, and we're just gonna keep pumping out higher quality stuff as we go along. But most importantly, out of all those things, I want you to comment down below, because the best part of doing YouTube is being able to talk to you guys down there in the comment section. What's your personal favorite of the three? I would love to know if anybody likes MaXXXine the most and understand why they think it's the best one. I'm genuinely curious about that conversation. It seems like a lot of people kind of prefer Pearl, I think, but I just love X, man. X was an awesome time at the movies. And if you made it to this part of the video, YouTube thinks that you're gonna like one of these two videos right here. So I hope they don't disappoint you. And yeah, if you check them out, I'd be really appreciative. So this is Chase. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I hope you have an awesome day. Thanks.